Nevada desert. October 2014. For years, Kenny Veach uploaded videos of himself hiking alone through remote parts of southern Nevada. Most of them followed the same pattern. Long stretches of desert terrain, abandoned mine areas, dry mountain passes, and isolated rock formations far outside Las Vegas. He moved through those places comfortably, like someone who had spent enough time out there for the silence and emptiness to stop feeling unusual. Online, he used the name Snake Bitmg. His channel never revolved around mysteries or conspiracy theories. The videos were mostly simple hiking footage, but that changed after a comment he posted beneath another video began spreading across hiking forums and message boards. Kenny said that during a previous trip near the Sheep Mountains, somewhere close to the Nellis Air Force Base region, he had discovered a cave unlike anything he had seen before. According to him, the entrance was shaped like a giant letter M. What stayed with people wasn't the shape of the cave itself. It was the way Kenny described approaching it. He said that as he moved closer to the entrance, his body began vibrating. The sensation intensified the nearer he got, strong enough that it triggered panic. Kenny turned around immediately and left the area without ever going inside. At first, the story sounded strange but isolated, the kind of thing that gets posted online and disappears after a few days. Instead, the opposite happened. People challenged him to go back. Some accused him of inventing the entire story. Others became convinced the location was tied to something hidden in the desert beyond Las Vegas, especially because of the surrounding military land and the long history of rumors attached to that region of Nevada. Eventually, Kenny decided to return. In October 2014, he uploaded a video titled M Cave Hike. The footage is unsettling now for a different reason than it was originally intended. Nothing unusual actually happens in the video. Kenny hikes through rough desert terrain searching for the cave he described earlier, climbing through rocky washes and narrow mountain paths while speaking casually to the camera. The landscape looks harsh, but ordinary. No strange sounds, no discoveries, no sign of the M-shaped entrance anywhere along the route. But as the video continues, there's a growing feeling that the terrain itself is beginning to swallow direction. Every canyon starts looking identical to the last. Sharp rock walls fold into more rock walls. Dry paths split apart and disappear into open desert. At several points, Kenny appears uncertain whether he's even retracing the same route anymore. By the end of the upload, he still hasn't found the cave. The video closes without resolution. At the time, it looked like nothing more than a failed search. A few weeks later, Kenny disappeared. Around November 10th, 2014, he told family members he was going hiking again in the same general region and planned to return within a couple of days. He never came back. Search teams eventually located his vehicle near the Sheep Mountains area. Days later, volunteers discovered his cell phone inside a canyon near a deep vertical mine shaft. The terrain surrounding the location was dangerous, even for experienced search crews. Steep rock, unstable ground, abandoned shafts, caves, and miles of remote desert with almost no visibility from above. Investigators tracked Kenny's movements as far as they could. Then the trail stopped. No body was ever recovered. The M Cave was never located or confirmed to exist. As the disappearance spread online, the final hike video changed completely in the eyes of the people watching it. Viewers began studying small details in the footage, trying to identify landmarks or hidden entrances buried somewhere in the mountains. Theories grew quickly from there. Secret military sites, underground facilities, hidden cave systems, Area 51 connections, but none of them were ever supported by evidence. Later, a woman claiming to be Kenny's girlfriend publicly suggested a different possibility. She said Kenny had struggled with depression, had quit his job more than a year earlier, and had once told her that if he ever chose to end his life, nobody would ever find him. She also noted that on his final hike, Kenny reportedly did not bring the camera he usually carried during his explorations. But even with that context, the video remained difficult for people to let go of. Because unlike most disappearances, this one came with footage attached to it. Hours of a man walking deeper into empty terrain searching for a place he claimed frightened him enough to flee the first time. And once he vanished in the same desert weeks later, the recording stopped feeling like a hiking video altogether. It started feeling like the beginning of something people realized too late they would never see the ending to. But in another case, the final footage would be far less ambiguous. This time, the camera wouldn't be pointed across an empty desert, searching for something hidden in the distance. It would be pointed downward, from hundreds of feet above a construction site in China, capturing an ordinary end to a workday before, within seconds, the recording suddenly lost all sense of direction at once. Xiaoqiumei, Jiangshan, Zhejiang Province. July 2021. Xiaoqiumei had already become recognizable to hundreds of thousands of people online. She was 23 years old, originally from Zunyi in Guizhou Province, and worked as a tower crane operator at a construction site in Jiangshan, a city in eastern China's Zhejiang Province. Online, she documented parts of that life through short videos posted to Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok. The account showed something viewers weren't used to seeing: a young mother of two spending her workdays suspended high above active construction sites, operating machinery from a narrow cab positioned hundreds of feet in the air. The contrast was what drew attention first. In many of the videos, Xiao appeared relaxed and comfortable, at heights most people would struggle to stand in. She filmed herself climbing the crane structure, recording views over the construction site below, sometimes joking with the camera during breaks between work. Viewers had even warned her in the comments to be careful while filming in that environment, especially when clips showed her navigating the crane while distracted by her phone. But by that point, the account had already grown quickly. Chinese reports estimated she had gained more than 100,000 followers, with some viewers referring to her as the most beautiful tower crane operator. Most of the footage followed the same tone: long days above the construction site, wind noise, steel frameworks disappearing into fog or late afternoon sunlight. The camera often looked downward from impossible heights, giving viewers a perspective few people ever experience firsthand. Over time, the account stopped feeling like construction footage and started feeling more like a record of daily life lived almost entirely above ground level. Then, on July 15, 2021, that footage changed completely. The accident happened near the end of the workday, sometime around 5:40 p.m. Xiao had already shut down the crane and was descending from it when something went wrong. Exactly what happened next remains unclear. There were no direct eyewitnesses to the fall itself. Government staff later said there was no surveillance camera positioned on the crane, meaning investigators had no complete visual record of the incident. But almost immediately after news of her death spread online, another video began circulating across Chinese social media. The footage was brief and chaotic. The image spun violently as the phone dropped, followed by screaming and the sound of impact before the recording stopped moving entirely on the ground below. Xiao had been filming herself while climbing down from the crane and accidentally recorded her own death in the process. The video spread rapidly. At the same time, viewers returned to Xiao's older videos with a completely different perspective. What had once looked routine suddenly felt fragile. Every climb up the crane, every shot overlooking the construction site below, every casual movement filmed hundreds of feet above the ground. The account had documented the kind of environment where one mistake, even a small one, leaves almost no time to recover from it. One of her final uploads received more than 20,000 condolence messages after the accident. People who had followed her account began revisiting clips she had posted only days earlier, fully aware that the ordinary moments captured there, another shift ending, another climb down from the crane, another quiet video above the skyline, were now part of the final visual record she left behind. Her ashes were returned to her hometown in rural Guizhou province. And in the next case, the final footage would capture something equally difficult to interpret at first. A man moving alone through an airport terminal in broad daylight, appearing calm, uninjured, and completely unaware that within hours he would vanish without explanation, leaving behind one of the most unsettling surveillance recordings ever tied to a disappearance. Lars Mittank, Varna, Bulgaria, July 2014. The footage lasts less than a minute. A man bursts out of an airport terminal, glancing over his shoulder as he runs. He isn't carrying luggage. He isn't holding a phone. Within seconds, he crosses the parking area outside Varna Airport, climbs over a tall fence, and disappears toward an open field at the edge of the property. That recording is the last confirmed sighting of 28-year-old Lars Mittank. A week earlier, there had been nothing unusual about the trip. Lars had traveled from Germany to Bulgaria on June 30th, 2014, alongside 5 friends for a holiday at Golden Sands, a resort area along the Black Sea coast near Varna. According to the people who traveled with him, the vacation started normally. They swam, drank, played football, went out at night, and spent most of the trip moving between the beach and local bars around the resort. Then, near the end of the vacation, something shifted. On July 6th, Lars reportedly got into an argument with a group of other German tourists over football. Lars supported Werder Bremen. The other men were said to be Bayern Munich fans. At some point during the night, Lars separated from his friends and disappeared for several hours. When he returned the next morning, he told them he had been attacked by 4 men. The injuries were serious enough that he went to a doctor afterward. Lars had damage to his jaw and a ruptured or perforated eardrum, an injury that created a new problem immediately. He was advised not to fly home yet because of the pressure changes during the flight. The doctor prescribed cefprozil, an antibiotic, and told him to wait before traveling. His friends offered to remain in Bulgaria with him. Lars told them to leave without him. On July 7th, after the others returned to Germany, Lars checked into Hotel Color Varna, a smaller hotel closer to the airport, where he planned to stay alone before attempting another flight home the following day. That was when his behavior became difficult to explain. During phone calls with his mother, Sandra Mittank, Lars spoke quietly, sometimes almost whispering. He told her that people were following him or trying to rob him. At one point, he asked her to cancel his credit cards. Security footage from inside the hotel later showed him pacing through hallways, repeatedly looking out windows, and hiding briefly inside an elevator as if avoiding someone nearby. Sometime around 1 a.m., Lars suddenly left the hotel. Roughly an hour later, he came back. What he did during that period remains unknown. The next morning, July 8th, Lars texted his mother, saying he was already at the airport and was trying to get home. Before checking in for the flight, he visited the airport medical office to ask whether he was fit to travel. The interaction inside that room would become one of the strangest parts of the entire case. The airport doctor, Kosta Kostov, later described Lars as agitated and visibly nervous. Lars reportedly kept asking questions about the medication he had been prescribed after the injury to his ear. Physically, he appeared well enough to fly. Then, in the middle of the appointment, a construction worker entered the office area. The airport was undergoing renovation work at the time, and workers were moving through different sections of the terminal throughout the day. But the moment Lars noticed the man, his behavior changed instantly. According to the doctor, Lars became terrified. He began trembling, backed away, and shouted, "I don't want to die here! I have to get out of here!" Then he ran. He abandoned everything inside the airport, his luggage, wallet, passport, and mobile phone, before sprinting out through the terminal and into the open area outside. Airport CCTV captured the entire sequence in fragments. Lars running across the property, climbing over the perimeter fence, then disappearing beyond the edge of the camera's view toward nearby fields and woodland. No confirmed sighting of him has ever surfaced after that moment. Searches were conducted around the airport and surrounding areas, but nothing produced a clear answer. Over the years, theories multiplied around the footage. Some believed Lars suffered paranoia connected to a head injury from the reported assault days earlier. Others focused on the medication he had been prescribed. There were theories involving organized crime, trafficking, voluntary disappearance, psychosis, memory loss, or foul play after he fled the airport. None of them were ever proven. What kept the case alive was the footage itself. Because unlike many disappearances, this one appears to capture the exact moment something inside a person changes. Lars enters the airport looking exhausted, but functional. Minutes later, he is running from something only he appears to see. And once the video ends, the explanation disappears with him. Years later, the airport recording continues circulating online, replayed frame by frame by people trying to understand what could make someone abandon every possession they had and sprint blindly away from the last place they were ever seen. And in the next case, the final footage would document something very different. Not panic or confusion, but exhaustion. A group of climbers descending from high on an Indian mountain, recording themselves as conditions around them began collapsing. Unaware that the camera was capturing the beginning of a disaster, none of them would survive. Nanda Devi climbers, Nanda Devi East, India. May 2019. At nearly 20,000 feet above sea level, the camera captures almost no sound, just wind moving across snow. The footage shows a line of climbers advancing slowly along a narrow ridge high in the Indian Himalayas. Each person is connected by rope, moving carefully through deep snow beneath a bright, cloudless sky. There's no visible panic in the recording, no indication that anything has already gone wrong. The group continues forward methodically, step by step, toward a peak that had never officially been climbed before. Then the footage cuts off. For years, mountaineering disasters were usually reconstructed afterward through radio calls, GPS signals, or the condition of equipment left behind on the mountain. But in this case, investigators recovered something far rarer, a camera containing the climbers' final recorded moments before the avalanche that killed them. The expedition began in May 2019. British mountain guide Martin Moran, a veteran climber with decades of experience in high-altitude expeditions, had traveled to the Nanda Devi region of Uttarakhand with an international team of climbers. In total, the wider expedition included 12 people, but at some point during the climb, the group divided. 4 climbers remained on a separate route. The other 8 continued toward a remote, unnamed peak near Nanda Devi East. The group included climbers from Britain, the United States, Australia, and India. Their objective was ambitious even by Himalayan standards. The peak they were attempting had never officially been climbed before, and the terrain surrounding it was unstable, isolated, and extremely vulnerable to rapid weather changes and avalanche activity. As the team pushed higher into the mountain range, communication eventually stopped. Around May 26th, contact with the climbing group was lost completely. At first, there was uncertainty about what had happened. The remaining members of the expedition waited for signs that the team was descending or attempting to re-establish contact. When no one returned, search operations began across the region. But conditions on the mountain complicated everything. Poor weather and dangerous terrain slowed aerial searches for days, and much of the route was buried beneath fresh snow. Eventually, search teams identified evidence of a massive avalanche near the area where the climbers had last been traveling. Then, bodies began appearing on the mountain. In June 2019, recovery teams located multiple climbers high along the route. 7 bodies were eventually recovered from the slope. An 8th climber, expedition leader Martin Moran, was never found. What investigators later discovered near the recovery site changed the case completely. At roughly 5,800 meters above sea level, close to where the bodies had been located, Search teams recovered a camera buried in the snow. Inside was a short recording from the final ascent. The clip lasted just over 2.5 minutes. It showed the climbers roped together, advancing carefully across a narrow snow ridge toward the summit. The conditions in the footage appear calm. Bright sunlight reflects off untouched snowfields, surrounding the team on every side. The climbers move in sync, maintaining spacing along the ridge while navigating terrain that narrows sharply beneath them. Then the image suddenly ends. The avalanche itself is never seen directly in the recording, but investigators believed the footage captured the group only moments before disaster struck. Later, analysis suggested the climbers may have been crossing an unstable snow ledge or ridge section that collapsed beneath their weight, triggering the avalanche that swept through the slope. The details investigators found afterward matched what appeared in the video. Several of the recovered climbers were still connected by rope, exactly as they had been during the ascent footage. The camera effectively became a final timeline of the team's last confirmed movements before the mountain buried the route completely. One official later compared the recovered footage to a plane's black box, not because it captured the moment of impact itself, but because it preserved the final normal moments before everything disappeared. That's part of what made the recording so unsettling once it was released publicly. The climbers don't appear reckless in the footage. They don't look lost or visibly afraid. In fact, the video feels strangely calm considering what's about to happen. The group moves with the discipline and rhythm of experienced mountaineers, surrounded by conditions that appear almost peaceful from the camera's perspective. And then the recording simply stops. No warning visible to the audience, no visible collapse. Just a final image of climbers progressing toward the summit before the mountain erased the rest of the sequence completely. And in the next case, the final footage would unfold far from snow and altitude, inside the brightly lit corridors of a Dublin office building late at night, where a young man leaving work would briefly appear on security cameras before vanishing into the city without a trace. Trevor Deely, Dublin, Ireland. December 8, 2000. At 4:14 in the morning, Trevor Deely walks past an ATM camera on Haddington Road, carrying a large umbrella. The street is almost empty. Rain moves across the pavement beneath the orange glow of streetlights as Trevor walks calmly in the direction of his apartment. He doesn't appear injured. He doesn't seem distressed. There's nothing in the footage that immediately stands out as unusual. Roughly 30 seconds later, another figure appears on the same camera, moving in the same direction Trevor had just gone. That was the last confirmed sighting of 22-year-old Trevor Deely. Earlier that night, nothing about his routine had seemed alarming. Trevor worked as a junior IT employee at Bank of Ireland Asset Management in Dublin and had attended a Christmas party with co-workers on the evening of December 7, 2000. Like thousands of other office workers across the city that night, he spent the evening drinking and celebrating before eventually heading back toward the city center after the party ended. At some point during the night, Trevor returned to his office building on Wilton Terrace. The reason was simple. He wanted to collect an umbrella and prepare for work the following morning. But the CCTV footage from outside the building would later become some of the most analyzed surveillance recordings in Irish history. At around 3:34 a.m., cameras captured an unidentified man standing near the rear entrance of Trevor's workplace. He appeared to be waiting in the rain near the gate leading into the office complex. Moments later, Trevor approached the building. As Trevor arrived, the man stepped forward and followed him toward the gate. The two briefly spoke outside the entrance. The interaction lasted only seconds. Trevor then entered the building alone. Inside, he spent time at the office checking emails and using the computer while the rain continued outside. A few minutes later, two additional men appeared near the rear gate on CCTV, but investigators later identified them as Trevor's co-workers who had returned briefly to the office themselves. The man dressed in black who approached Trevor earlier was never identified at the time. Shortly after 4 a.m., Trevor left the office again. The footage shows him locking the gate behind him before opening his umbrella and beginning the walk home through Dublin's south inner city. A few minutes later, at approximately 4:06 a.m., he called his friend Glenn Cullen and left a voicemail. The message sounded normal. Trevor casually explained that he had missed him earlier and was on his way home. There was no panic in his voice, no indication that anything was wrong. Because nothing about the message seemed important at the time, the voicemail was eventually deleted. Then came the final camera sighting on Haddington Road. Trevor passes the ATM camera. 30 seconds later, another man appears moving in the same direction. For years, investigators focused heavily on the possibility that the second man was connected to Trevor's disappearance. Gardaí later clarified that the individual seen in the Haddington Road footage had eventually been identified and interviewed, and investigators no longer believed his movements were suspicious. But by then, the image had already become permanently attached to the mystery surrounding the case, because after that final recording, Trevor Deely simply vanished. He never arrived home. At first, nobody immediately realized something was wrong. It had been a late Christmas party night, and Trevor's flatmates were away that weekend. His absence only became alarming after he failed to appear for work the following Monday. Then the searches began. Family members, friends, co-workers, and Gardaí spread across Dublin, looking for any sign of him. Hundreds of posters appeared throughout the city. Thousands of leaflets were handed out. Investigators searched the nearby River Dodder and sections of the Grand Canal in case Trevor had fallen into the water while walking home in the rain. Nothing was found, and over time, the case only became stranger. The CCTV footage continued circulating publicly for years as investigators repeatedly appealed for information. In 2017, enhanced footage was released alongside renewed searches connected to information suggesting Trevor may have been murdered and buried at a secluded site in Chapelizod, several kilometers away from where he was last seen. The search uncovered other criminal evidence at the location, including drugs and a weapon, but nothing directly connected to Trevor himself. Still, no trace of him emerged. Then, more than 2 decades after the disappearance, investigators confirmed they had finally identified another man seen in the CCTV recordings near Trevor that night. Even with that development, the core mystery remained unchanged. No confirmed sightings after 4:14 a.m. No body. No explanation. What makes the case linger is how ordinary the footage feels. Trevor isn't shown entering dangerous terrain or behaving erratically before vanishing. He's simply walking home through Dublin after work drinks, carrying an umbrella through the rain like countless other people crossing the city that night. The recording captures a moment so routine that nobody looking at it in real time would have imagined they were watching the final confirmed seconds of someone's life before they disappeared completely. And in the next case, the final footage would capture a different kind of escalation entirely. A waterfall in eastern India, where a group of friends filming travel content suddenly realized the rising water around them was moving faster than anyone could escape it. Sagar Kundu, Duduma Waterfall, India. August 23, 2025. The video begins like dozens of travel clips posted online every day. A group of young creators stand near the edge of Duduma Waterfall in Odisha, filming drone shots and short videos around the rocks overlooking the water. The mood is casual. People are talking over the sound of the falls, moving equipment between locations, trying to capture footage before the weather shifts again. Then the water starts rising. At first, the change doesn't seem dramatic. The current becomes faster. Spray thickens around the rocks. But within moments, the flow intensifies enough that people near the edge begin backing away from the waterline. One person doesn't make it back in time. 22-year-old Sagar Kundu had traveled to Duduma Waterfall with friends to film content for social media. Originally from Berhampur in Odisha's Ganjam district, Sagar had been building an audience online through travel videos and location-based content filmed across different parts of the state. That week, he and several other creators had been moving between tourist sites around Koraput, recording footage for YouTube and short-form videos, including aerial drone shots around the waterfall area. Duduma itself is enormous. The waterfall drops roughly 175 meters into steep terrain below, surrounded by rock formations made unstable by constant mist and fast-moving water. During periods of heavy rainfall, conditions around the falls can shift extremely quickly, especially when additional water is released through the nearby Machkund Dam system upstream. On the afternoon of August 23rd, heavy rain in the region had already increased pressure around the reservoir. While filming near the falls, Sagar moved farther onto the rocks close to the water. Friends reportedly warned him repeatedly that the flow was rising too quickly. He stayed there anyway. Then the release upstream changed the entire force of the waterfall almost instantly. The current surged across the rocks, cutting Sagar off from the others within seconds. Video recorded at the scene shows him stranded as water crashes around him, struggling to maintain balance while people nearby shout instructions and search desperately for a way to reach him. But the force of the water kept increasing. Witnesses later described Sagar pleading for help with folded hands while trying to stay upright against the current. At one point, he reportedly threw his camera equipment and batteries away from himself, possibly trying to lighten what he was carrying as the water continued pushing across the rocks. None of it helped. Moments later, the current swept him into the waterfall. The footage spread online almost immediately afterward. What makes the recording difficult to watch is how long the sequence unfolds before the final moment happens. There's enough time for people to realize the situation is becoming serious, enough time for rescue attempts to begin, enough time for the panic in the voices behind the camera to completely change, but not enough time to reach him. Search operations began shortly afterward, involving police, disaster response teams, fire personnel, and local residents. The terrain surrounding Duduma made the operation extremely difficult. Fast-moving water, unstable rock surfaces, and continuing rainfall complicated searches downstream for days. During the operation, authorities recovered some of Sagar's equipment from the water, including a bag containing filming batteries and gear believed to have been thrown away moments before he disappeared into the current. For more than 10 days, no trace of him was found. Then, on September 3rd, search teams recovered a body identified as Sagar Kundu, several kilometers downstream near the Machkund Hydro Power Project. By that point, the condition of the remains reflected how violent the water flow through the area had been during the days after the accident. Investigators also recovered a mobile phone near the site before sending the remains for post-mortem examination. But for most people following the case online, the defining image had already become the video itself. Because unlike many drowning incidents captured on camera, this footage preserves the moment where the situation visibly shifts from dangerous to irreversible. A normal filming session slowly turns into a rescue attempt in real time, with everyone present understanding what's happening only seconds before it becomes impossible to stop. And in another case, surveillance footage would once again become the center of an investigation, this time inside an empty church before sunrise, where security cameras captured a figure moving slowly through dark hallways only minutes before a woman arrived for work and never left the building alive. Jennifer Casa, Orlando, Florida. January 24th, 2006. The surveillance footage lasts only a few seconds. A person parks a black Chevrolet Malibu at an apartment complex in Orlando around midday, steps out of the vehicle, and walks calmly away from the camera. Nothing about the movement appears rushed or unusual. The person disappears behind a fence line, running alongside the walkway, moving frame by frame through the camera's field of view. And somehow, in every single frame where the face should become visible, it's blocked by the fence posts almost perfectly. That footage became the defining image in the disappearance of 24-year-old Jennifer Kesse. At the time, Jennifer's life appeared stable and structured. She worked as a finance manager in Orlando and lived alone at the Mosaic at Millennia Condominium Complex near the mall at Millennia area. Friends and family described her as organized, dependable, and consistent with routines, the kind of person who rarely disappeared without explanation or suddenly broke contact with people close to her. The night before she vanished, Jennifer had just returned from a vacation. On January 23, 2006, she left work around 6 p.m., spoke with family members while driving home, and later talked with her boyfriend by phone around 10 o'clock that night. Nothing during the conversation sounded unusual. The call would later become the last confirmed conversation anyone had with her. The next morning, something immediately felt wrong. Jennifer normally contacted her boyfriend before work, but on January 24th, there was nothing. No call, no message. Attempts to reach her went straight to voicemail. Soon afterward, her employer realized she had failed to arrive at work entirely. That was unusual enough that her family drove to Orlando to check on her personally. When they arrived at Jennifer's condominium, her car was gone. But inside the condo itself, the scene suggested she had started her morning normally. There were signs she had showered and prepared for work. Clothing and personal items had been left out in ways that made the apartment look interrupted rather than abandoned. Nothing inside immediately suggested a struggle. At the same time, several of Jennifer's most important belongings were missing. Her purse, keys, cell phone, and iPod were all gone with her. None of those items have ever been recovered. Her phone was powered off, and there was no activity on her bank accounts after that morning. Then, 2 days later, investigators found her car. Jennifer's black 2004 Chevrolet Malibu had been abandoned at the Huntington on the Green apartment complex, roughly a mile away from where she lived. A resident recognized the vehicle after seeing media coverage surrounding the disappearance and contacted police. That discovery led investigators to the surveillance footage that would eventually define the entire case. The cameras showed an unidentified person parking Jennifer's vehicle around noon on the day she vanished. After stepping out of the car, the person walked away from the complex and disappeared from view. The footage immediately frustrated investigators for one specific reason. Although multiple frames captured the individual walking past the camera, fence posts positioned between the lens and the sidewalk blocked the face almost perfectly every time. Investigators later estimated the person's height at roughly 5 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 5 inches, and federal agencies were brought in to help analyze and enhance the footage. Even with additional examination, the person's identity could not be determined. The recording became infamous because it feels impossibly close to revealing something important while never actually doing it. The person is there, the movement is clear, the body language is visible, but the single detail investigators needed most, the face, never appears. Meanwhile, the rest of the case produced very little physical evidence. Valuables remained inside Jennifer's car, making robbery appear less likely as a motive. Investigators also believed the vehicle had been wiped down, limiting forensic evidence further. At one point, a tracking dog reportedly followed a scent trail from the abandoned car back in the direction of Jennifer's condominium complex, raising the possibility that whoever parked the vehicle may have returned toward the area where she lived afterward. Attention gradually focused on the environment surrounding the condo complex itself. At the time Jennifer disappeared, the Mosaic at Millennia property was undergoing extensive construction and renovation work. Jennifer had reportedly told family members she sometimes felt uncomfortable around certain workers at the complex. Over the years, theories repeatedly centered on the possibility that someone connected to the construction site may have targeted her, though no suspect was ever publicly confirmed. And despite years of investigation, the core mystery never changed. Jennifer vanished sometime between leaving her condominium for work and arriving at her office, a drive that should have taken only minutes. No confirmed trace of her has ever been found. Years later, the investigation remained active. Her family continued pushing for new forensic testing and access to case materials, refusing to let the disappearance fade into another unresolved file. New DNA testing eventually renewed investigative interest, and authorities stated the case was no longer considered cold. But even after nearly 2 decades, the surveillance footage still dominates the case, because unlike most disappearances, there is a visible moment where someone connected to Jennifer's final known movements appears directly on camera. The evidence exists in plain view. People can watch it repeatedly, slow it down, freeze every frame, and still leave without knowing who they're looking at.